Well, hello, American literature fans. I want to talk to you today about our midterm that is coming up. And so, if you'd like to follow along with me, click on Content up at the top of our course page, and then click on Course Documents in the left-hand sidebar, and then look for Midterm Exam Prep Sheet. So during week 7, which begins on the 28th of February and ends on the 6th day of March, I'll ask you to take a midterm exam, and you must complete both parts 1 and 2 of that midterm and submit them before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, the 6th of March. So the exam will consist of the following: 5 multiple choice questions worth 10 points each, 5 quote identification questions worth 10 points each, and 1 short essay question that you respond to, which is worth 100 points. So the total points possible are 200 points, which equates to 20% of your final grade in the class. So the midterm is a big point maker. So here are the things that you want to study for part 1 of the midterm, where you have those multiple choice questions. Know the following periods or genres, types or kinds of literature in modern American lit, and their basic common themes, characteristics, and ideas. So look back at realism, look at local color realism, think about what makes local color realism distinct from just general realism. Look at naturalism and think about how realism and naturalism are different from each other and how they both differ from romanticism, the period that came before our time period of 1865, right at the end of the Civil War, begins. And also you want to look back at the African American literature of the late 19th, early 20th centuries. You want to look at early 20th century poetry. You want to look at imagism. So think about Amy Lowell and imagism, Ezra Pound. Be sure you understand how imagism is different than imagery, and also symbolism. You want to look at the course documents on the various genres and techniques. You want to read back through some of the discussion boards. I will open all of that up for you so that you can see it. You might want to look back at some of my videos on some of these ideas. And you can look at your syllabus and your weekly checklist for a listing of those documents and the discussion boards that we've engaged in thus far. The syllabus gives you the various texts that are falling under our study of local color realism, naturalism, African American lit, all of that, so that you can look and see which readings fall under those categories if you look back at the syllabus. Pay a lot of attention when you're in the discussion board postings to the quotes that were used there. So you want to sort of look back at the questions in each one of those discussion board postings, because your classmates might have responded to a different question than you, which might have contained a quote that you need to know. Look at the terminology, the main ideas that are pointed out on those course documents and in the discussions. And again, be sure that you've watched the videos. Know those various genres. So if I ask you, when did realism happen? When did naturalism happen? Know the time periods. Know the salient points, so the main, most significant points or ideas of how you would define realism or naturalism or whatever it might be. And you may not use your textbook or any class documents during part 1 of the exam. And in part 1 is timed. So as I say, it's divided up into 2 parts, and that first part consists of 5 multiple choice questions. And here's an example of what one of those questions might look like. The period of time that encompasses the realism period in American literature is A, 1914 to 1945, B, from the war between the states, also called the Civil War, up until 1914, C, from the Civil War to the turn of the 20th century, or D, from 1850 to 1910. So if you said letter C, from the Civil War to the turn of the 20th century, 1900, you are correct. And in fact, a little birdie came flying in just a minute ago and whispered in my ear and said, you know what, Professor I, this very question just might appear on the midterm. And the students who watched this video and didn't fast forward through it or just skip over it might actually get that question correct. Yeah. The second part of part 1 features, as I said, actual quotes or passages from our readings up to this point in the semester. And so it will be your job to identify the reading, the title of that reading, and the author who wrote it. Now, with each question, you'll have a listing of texts and authors that's provided. However, not all of the names of the authors and titles that are listed will actually be used. So, there's going to be more probabilities than there are correct answers, obviously, and it's your job to figure out which was the correct title and author's name. And note that I will not mix up titles and authors' names. So in other words, I won't put the wrong author's name with a title because I feel like that's really not fair. But here's an example of what one of those quotes might look like. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand, in all things essential to mutual progress. Well, did you remember that Booker T. Washington, who wrote the Atlanta Exposition Address, wrote those words in his address and spoke them in his address? If you did, you're correctamundo again. Good job. And that same little birdie came flying in and said, "Oh, Professor I." And I said, "Yes, birdie." And he said, "This question just might be on the midterm too." Yay! Students who are actually watching the video might get this question right. Awesome. So part 2 of the midterm consists of a short essay question, which I have posted for you below. And this is the actual question that will be on the midterm. So you can and you should use your Norton Anthology textbook, class documents, the Little Brown Essential Handbook, a dictionary, whatever you want for this section of the exam. And note that you can write this section before you go to submit it. So you can take your time in writing this. This is not a situation where you're going to go into assignments and you only have so long to write this. You can write this in advance of submission and really take your time. You'll be expected to write at least 4 to 5 paragraphs in response to the prompt below. And there's no need to go way over that. Just 4 to 5 normal paragraphs. Your essay should have a clear, identifiable thesis statement at the end of paragraph 1. And it should have supporting paragraphs that contain a topic sentence. So remember back from English 1010, a topic sentence is the first sentence in a paragraph that tells your reader what this paragraph is going to be like, or what it's going to talk about. Or it may sort of act like a link in a chain. So it may look back at what you just said and or look forward to what you are about to say as well. So you need a clear topic sentence at the beginning of each paragraph, and you need 2 to 3 main points that you're focusing on. So the main points are going to come from the questions that I'm asking you. You must quote from your chosen reading at least 2 times, and you must cite those quotes within your paper in correct MLA formatting. And you should double space, and you should type in Times New Roman 12-point font. So here is the question, the prompt that you'll be considering. Choose and comment on one text that we have studied so far this semester. What are the main messages and themes inherent in this text? So that's going to be one of your main points there. What are the themes? What is the underlying theme? What's the main idea? There may be more than one that the author is trying to get through. What particular genre? So what kind of literature is this? Is it realism? Is it local color realism? Is it naturalism? Is it symbolism? Is it imagism? What genre does it fall into? And what technique or techniques might it represent? So what elements let you know that this particular text serves as an example of its genre? So what lets you know for sure this is realism, or this is naturalism, or this is imagism? And what are the techniques being used? So if it's creative writing, if it's poetry, you might see alliteration, you might see imagery. If it's an Amy Lowell piece, you're going to see imagism. You might see metaphor, you might see symbolism. What's going on there? Now, here are some other important points that will help you earn a higher grade. Be sure not to use first or second person in your writing. This is formal college writing. So no I, no me. You're not going to say, I feel that this text is an example of realism because. This text is important to me because. No, this is formal writing. So no first person, no second person. Like, you will see that this text matters because blah, blah, blah. No. Use one instead. One may argue that this text serves as an example of imagism because one may see that, this is a formal paper. Your essay should contain a formal heading on page 1, and I've given you an example there. Your name, my name, the course name, and the date in correct MLA formatting. So this has 9 October 2020. Obviously you'll be using the current date, but you see how MLA does it there. And then on all the successive pages, you put your last name and the page number. Now, you may also do that on page 1 in the upper right-hand corner if you wish, but you certainly need to do it if you go into page 2. You want to make sure that you incorporate the quote when you quote in your short essay response, and you must quote twice at least. So you do not want to drop the quote. So here's an example of an incorporated quote. The author masterfully presents a seemingly naive young man who poses as a Bible salesman, : quote, well, lady, I'll tell you the truth. Not many people want to buy a Bible nowadays, and besides, I know I'm real simple. I don't know how to say a thing but to say it. I'm just a country boy, unquote. And then in parentheses, you have the author's last name, O'Connor. You have the page number from where the quote comes, 362. You have your closing parenthesis mark, and then your period. So if you don't do all of this correctly, you'll get points deducted. Now, let me show you something important here. What if that colon after the words Bible salesman had been a period? Well, then the quote would be dropped and you would get points deducted. So remember the rule. Anytime a quote appears all by itself as a sentence in your essay, without any wording from you, just the quote as a sentence, you've dropped it, and you will get points deducted. It does not matter whether the sentence before it relates to it or not. If the quote is by itself as a sentence, it's dropped. And so the colon allows this quote to become part of your sentence structure. If that colon had become a period, you've dropped the quote. Note that there's no period in MLA ever, ever, ever that's going to appear at the end of the quote. Rather, your period appears after your in-text citation, after O'Connor 362. Note that there's no comma between the author's last name and the page number. There's no P for page. The word page isn't there. Make sure you have your MLA formatting correct to avoid losing points. Now, remember that when you're quoting from poetry, it's going to look different. So you're going to place the line number, not the page number, in your in-text citation. And the rule for that states that because poems are generally shorter works, often appearing just on one page. You need the line number of the poem, so you got to count the lines. So you also need to use, when you're quoting poetry, diagonal marks to indicate the line breaks in the poem, placing a space both before and after that diagonal mark. The first time you quote from a poem, include a comma and the word line or lines, obviously depending on whether you're using more than one line, after the author's last name in your in-text citation. And here's an example. Amy Lowell uses images masterfully as she speaks of an autumn afternoon, quote, the trees glittered with the tumbling of leaves, space, diagonal, space. The sidewalk shone like alleys of dropped maple leaves, unquote. Parenthesis, Lowell, comma, lines 2-3, in parenthesis, period. Okay, that's how that should look. Now, after you quote from that poem for the first time in your paper, it's no longer necessary to include the word line or lines in subsequent in-text citations. Simply cite as follows, Lowell 2-3. And remember, any quote that appears all by itself as a sentence is a dropped quote, and you're going to have points deducted from your grade there. So you'll take part 1 of the midterm by going to quizzes, and that's up at the top of our Brightspace page. You'll click on quizzes, and you'll look for midterm exam part 1 and click on that. The questions again are multiple choice. You have a quote ID section, again multiple choice. They will be timed, and you need to take part 1 before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday the 6th of March. If you have not done that, you'll receive a 0 on it. You may submit your short essay for part 2 into the assignments section on our Brightspace course page. So look for midterm exam part 2. Click on assignments toward the top of the page, midterm exam part 2. And you want to submit your draft, again, no later than 11:59 p.m. on Sunday the 6th of March. Otherwise, you receive a 0 on that part of the midterm. So best of luck to you, and if you have any other questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time.